Hi, all you sweet little darlings, coming live again. And I have a story. I'm going to start with this story. Not so long ago, I was listening to somebody, and that person was, I don't know, I was either reading it or they were talking about it, and they were saying that they came from a long line of fiber artists. Their mother, their grandmother, their great grandmother, all of these people were amazing fiber artists. And I can remember, I'm getting a sneak peek over here of what my work is, what I'm going to tell you about. I can remember listening to this person and thinking to myself, wow, she's so lucky. That's so amazing. I don't have that. And then realizing that I do have that. But it took me a while to actually figure it out that both of my grandmothers were, quote, fiber artists. It's just that we didn't call them fiber artists. We just called them grandmothers, or they were just like old, and that's just what they did. But they were actually fiber artists. But I hadn't connected the dots. And that's really telling to me, that story, and very powerful. So thanks for being here. I'm going live, which is my AI protest. I'm going live because I want something to have no editing. I want it to be, authentic is really like the catchword. I want it to be authentic. But more than that, actually, I was thinking I want it to be real and I want it to feel real. So here I am being the real Sam. I am Sam from thesamanthawild.com, and I am many things, most famously the mother of 6 amazing, beautiful children who stretch from very young to not quite so young, and I adore them. And I am a nationally juried fiber artist, and I am a long time yoga teacher. I was ordained as a minister, as an interfaith minister more than 25 years ago, got a little fiber firm going, and obviously I'm somebody who likes to talk. I don't know how people can be on YouTube who don't like to talk. And what I want to share with you tonight is sitting here on the loom. I'm actually doing a new piece. I've been sharing about my mystical mystery scars. I have a beautiful new piece going, and you can see some of the dried flowers. But actually, what I want to share with you is here, because that story and that experience of realizing that I actually had the grandmothers. I actually had those same grandmothers that this person was talking about, but I hadn't realized it, is part of what set me on a journey of connecting with grandmother. And I mean that both literally, maybe, but really strongly, symbolically, and metaphorically. And so I sat down not so long ago and I began to felt. And this is who I felted. First, I want to show you her hair, and then I want to show you her face. Now, this was the first grandmother. I wasn't consciously trying to felt this grandmother. It's almost like she emerged. And I want you to see in the category of being real that she has one eye that's a little bigger and one eye that's a little smaller. And that's true about me, but I didn't do it on purpose. Maybe you have that too. One eye for me, a little bigger. And so the grandmother emerged, and she really felt like a being to me. She really felt like a magical being. Now, I didn't have a context. I wasn't learning. I wasn't copying. I didn't have an idea. I hadn't seen any other grandmother like this that gave me the thought to do this. She really came into being as if she wanted to come into being. And after I made her, I said, Tommy, I love her, and she loves you, and she wants to talk to you. Like she's a real, just holding this sort of magic element. And then these other grandmothers started to emerge. And as the other grandmothers started to emerge in the felting, I began to think more and more deeply about what I mean when I say grandmother. So when we say getting the wisdom of the grandmothers, that may or may not be specific to you and your actual grandmother. You might have to go back many generations to find a grandmother that you'd actually want to spend time with. I mean, not everybody got a perfect grandmother, but some people did. And we hear a lot about grandmothers and the creativity of grandmothers and the wisdom of grandmothers when we're on YouTube as crafters, as makers, as artists. And a lot of people talking about going back to earlier times or simpler times or more sustainable times. I'm talking about reaching in and connecting with an enchanted grandmother, hence this sort of grandmotherly being, a very enchanted being. I can't seem to hold her correctly. So let me show you a few more of the grandmothers. So she's there, and here's another grandmother, again, the wonderful hair coming out. And there she is with her little tiny cap. It's very different than the other grandmother. So as I continue to make the grandmothers, each one being very unique, you'll see, here's a grandmother owl. I love her. And then there's the shepherdess grandmother. She's got her shepherd's crook and her beautiful cape. And she was made with her little sheep. The grandmother with her little sheep. Very different. I've had many grandmothers sell. I'll link to them below if you love any of these grandmothers and they call to you. And this was the grandmother made for Valentine's Day. Look at the beautiful heart hair. Look at the beautiful hair. And she's, of course, covered with hearts. She's the love grandmother. And here's the thing, we may or may not have a grandmother on planet Earth that we can connect to, or we might have a grandmother that we can connect to, but we don't want to, or we might have missed the chance to connect with a grandmother or to get her wisdom. Maybe she wasn't even that wise. Here's a grandmother. I think she was like Grandmother Winter with her little mittens. But we don't need a grandmother on planet Earth or a grandmother who was really wise to be able to connect to the grandmother. And for me, it is genuinely that symbolic, metaphoric experience of connecting backward to an enchanted sense of the grandmother. And I like how the little dolls hold that, So I grew up, I don't remember ever seeing anything like this, and I'll show them to you again, but we did always have something in our house, in our kitchen, called a kitchen witch. And I don't know the tradition that comes from. I kind of looked it up one time, but we'd always have one of those. And I think she was meant to bring in particular, although I could go back and do a lot of history and talk a lot about witches, but I'm not going to do that right now. What I really want to talk about is the sense of the grandmother to an enchanted kind of creativity. So if you could sit down with, or I could sit down with, a perfect grandmother, somebody who holds all of that wisdom and compassion and love, not just from a short amount of experiences, right? Because they're 20 or 30 or 40, but from a lot of experiences lived over a very, very long time. So think about what's bothering you. When I think about, oh my gosh, such a long list. Think about what's bothering you right now in the world, in your own life, somewhere like that. And imagine taking that to the grandmother and sitting with her again, not your real actual grandmother, but sitting with that perfect grandmother and getting her wisdom. Well, what's her wisdom about war? What's her wisdom about the state of the world? What's her wisdom about what you should do and how you should be creative? In that same way that story I opened with was such a thread of connection. It was like finding a way to connect the dots and see something that was missing, not in my life, but in my own thinking. I mean, it's amazing to me that I could have sat there listening to this woman, oh, my fiber artist grandmothers, and think I was jealous. How did she get that? Now, she did have grandmothers who actually sat down and instructed her. And that's not what happened to me. I have a quilt here. I actually don't think I can access it, that I could show you from my grandmother and my father's side. She made an incredible amount of very beautiful things. And by any standard is a fiber artist, although by no standard would have been recognized. And I had a relationship with her. I wrote letters with her. And I think she passed when I was like 11, 12, or 13. And so it would be wonderful to sit down and have a conversation with her, but not just the her of her who lived on planet Earth and struggled and had limitations. And I think there are ways that she was probably not a really lovely person, but that embodied grandmother who brings us to a place of enchantment. And I think that's part of why I love the idea of dolls. So I mentioned that I have 6 children. And what do children do with dolls? I mean, you can act out anything and allow them to embody anything. And they're a very powerful vehicle for the psychological, for the emotional, for the sense of feeling. My grandmother amongst these are all these grandmothers are in the shop except for this. This is my grandmother, and she sits right on my windowsill across from my sink where I do my dishes, and I spend a lot of time. Lord, I do a lot of dishes. And she just sits there and she reflects a lot to me. So sometimes she looks very serious and sometimes very lovingly. And that's part of why I love that I didn't add mouth to any of them. I didn't want to give them an expression. And there are traditions, I think particularly Waldorf is what comes to mind, where they wouldn't have put face on their dolls because then you could actually play with them and see that. A lot of traditions also believe that there's a spirit, an energy inside of the dolls. I think if we want to live an enchanted life, and I'll probably say more of that in some other of my videos because it's becoming more and more important to me. If we want to live an enchanted life, we have to be willing to be connected to an enchanted kind of wisdom, which is to say, not just the literal, like I don't have a grandma who's going to sit down and give me wisdom, but I can connect, visually, mentally, symbolically, in other ways. I can connect with a version of that grandmother. And through the little dolls, I do feel that sense of connecting, not to my grandmother, but to grandmother as this overarching and powerful concept. The grandmother, the holder of wisdom. And to that do I go then with my heaps of upset, with the heaviness and the burdens, with the worries about the world, and sort of sit inside of a presence with the grandmother, not just my grandmother. And I think the kind of creativity we could access from that source is so much bigger than the sort of creativity that we are accessing from even something as wonderful as watching a YouTube video. And they're wonderful. I'm making one, obviously. You're watching one, and people in the future watching it. But that is a very limited, right? The kind of creativity that we can get when we're allowing for a sense of enchantment and magic to infuse our thought it's not just 100-fold bigger than what we're getting reading a book about creativity or watching a video about creativity. It's infinite. It's infinitely bigger. It really does bring us to that place, like the story I told you in the beginning, where we go from, I wish I had that, to being like, wow, I have that. Whatever that thing is, right, that we think that we're missing. And often we think we're missing a lot of things. We go, oh, I actually have that. I actually have what I need inside of me to do whatever the thing is, to create the thing, to live the thing, to leave the person, to have the new journey, to have the new home, to have the new life. It's there. I really think that's part of that enchanted life. And in the enchanted life, we begin to see, oh, okay, there's some spirit, there's some energy, there's some grandma presence. So put in the comments, I would super love to know which your favorite grandmother is and which one you're drawn to, because as people have seen them and interacted with them, let me see if I can get this right. They really have been drawn to them in different ways. And what you're really, also great comments could be, did you have a wonderful grandmother? Did you not have a grandmother? What would it be like to reach out imaginatively to the idea of grandmother? Who didn't get her time up here? The owl grandmother. She's very different, of course, because she's not beautiful in the same way, but she's very owl, very serious. So leave a comment and let me know thoughts about grandmother and grandmother creativity, right? This is not a vintage show. This is not me doing a vintage show. This is really about that metaphoric and symbolic grandmother. So leave a comment and tell me your thoughts about the grandmother. And what else do I want to say? Well, I'm really happy you're here. Don't forget to give a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. I have people who say, well, I never saw that something came out. That's the way you do it. If you hit the notification bell, you know that something was out. And now I've talked for 14 minutes, so I think that I have to go. I'll link to the grandmothers below. And until then, like, super happy to be in community and relation to you. And I hope this felt like, authentic, but mostly real. Hope it felt real. Want to be real. Catch you later.